Good evening, everybody. We are going to start our meeting. Larry Block, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Hope I can remember it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. City Clerk, may we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Duran.
Here.
Councilmember Heilman.
Here.
Councilmember Meister.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath.
Here.
Mayor D'Amico.
Yes.
We have a quorum.
May I have a report of the closed session agenda, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight's meeting was called to order at 6 o'clock in these chambers. There were no public comments on the closed session agenda. There were no additions to the closed session agenda and no reportable actions taken by the council in closed session this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Colleagues, shall we talk about the agenda? Anything from our City Clerk?
No.
Okay.
I would like to pull from consent 2I, which is on inclusionary housing waitlist.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
If it's okay with the council, I'd like to try to add items 4A and 6A to consent.
Items 4A and 6A, do we have speakers on those items?
We have one speaker on 4A, no speakers on 6A, but there was one small typo found on the ordinance that I can read when we get to the,
Okay.
if you want.
I'd like to keep 6A.
6A, all right. 4A.
I would as
and-
well. I also have questions about 4A. Sorry.
Tried.
Okay, and item 4B we're going to talk about as well, I guess. Okay, so we're going to move item 2I from the consent calendar to excluded consent.
Mayor, I
Yes.
have comments on 2G and 2O on the consent calendar, but I don't think they will necessitate pulling them, so I'll make those under council member comments.
Sounds good. Thank you. I guess I'll press the motion button. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councilmember Duran. Let's vote on the agenda as amended. Oh, that's me. Okay. All right, we have an agenda. Adjournment motions. Who would like to begin? Any to my left? No?
As is our tradition to adjourn our meetings in honor of the military service personnel who were killed in service to our country since our last meeting, Army Private First Class Walter Lewerk, age 26, and to adjourn in memory of victims of mass shootings since our last meeting on Wednesday, February 26th. An employee opened fire at the Molson Coors complex in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The gunman killed 5 fellow employees. Jesus Valle Jr., age 33, Gennady Levshitz, age 61, Trevor Wetzelar, age 33, Dana Walk, age 57, Dale Hudson, age 50.
Thank you, without objection. And I would like to adjourn in honor of Joe Coulombe. Joe, we all know him affectionately as Trader Joe, opened his first store in Pasadena, California in 1967. He recalled in an interview seeing statistics that education levels in the United States were rising, and he decided to cater to people who were well-educated and well-traveled but with modest salaries. The store is focused on unusual foods, a generous selection of California wines, and a laid-back atmosphere. Mr. Coulombe finally retired as chief executive of Trader Joe's in 1988, and today the company has over 500 stores in 42 states and the District of Columbia, including 2 here in our own little West Hollywood. We'll miss you, Joe, but we'll still shop there going forward. All right, that's the end of our adjournment motions. Presentations. We have a presentation from the audience, I believe. No. Yes, a Women's History Month presentation, but I thought they were going to make a presentation first, and then we were going to present the certificate. And this evening, Councilmember Meister is going to make this presentation.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's Women's History Month, and in celebration of National Women's History Month 2020, the month of March is nationally recognized as National Women's History Month, the time to commemorate and reflect upon the many accomplishments of women and the ongoing efforts to achieve equal rights. And National Women's History Month provides an excellent venue to recognize and celebrate women's historic achievements, as well as an opportunity to honor women within our communities. The city has celebrated National Women's History Month for 33 years, and together with its Women's Advisory Board, works to ensure that programming reflecting women's diverse achievements is offered throughout the month. And activities for Women's History Month include Women's History Month banners displayed along Santa Monica Boulevard, International Women's Day celebration hosted by the Russian Advisory Board, a movie night featuring the film LA Woman Rising, mashup contemporary dance companies Each for Equal dance event, Reviving the Revolution, empowered lesbians and queer women of color read and discuss their written works, the 5th annual Hollywood Now Her Story Awards, the Trans Vagina Diaries, a special Arbor Day event, and the 25th annual Women in Leadership Awards and reception. So let it be resolved that the City Council of the City of West Hollywood hereby proclaims the month of March 2020 as National Women's History Month. And we urge you, all members of the community, to participate and celebrate with us. And if the Women's Advisory Board would come up, we also would ask Zoe Nicholson to please join us, a feminist activist and author.
Thank you very much.
Okay, folks, right here. Hands to your sides, please. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Zoe, if you would like to say a few words.
They're going to introduce her.
Terrific.
We also have a few things to say about Zoe.
Yeah, I knew there was a presentation. I just didn't know if it was before or after.
You know,
Yeah.
loosey-goosey.
Flexible.
So we, on behalf of the Women's Advisory Board, we feel like there are 3 things that you should know about Zoe Nicholson. The first, Zoe knows women's history. She spent her entire life studying life and achievements of suffragist icon Alice Paul, whom she calls her North Star. In fact, Zoe is the ultimate Alice Paul, an American suffrage scholar. The second thing you need to know about Zoe is that she is women's history. In 1982, she, along with 6 other women, embarked on a fast in Springfield, Illinois, to convince the state legislature to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. And for 37 days, is that right? Good Lord. Zoe lived only on water as she made the daily trip to her folding chair in the Illinois Rotunda lobby for the ERA. In the end, ERA was not ratified in Illinois in 1982, and other states remaining in ratification effort fell short. The third thing you should know is that Zoe has never given up on the ERA. She believes with her heart and soul that the most fundamental right that any American has is constitutional equality. Zoe has never stopped lobbying for the ERA, traveling across the country to raise awareness and urge others to take up the fight. We expect that Zoe will never stop calling out the need for the ERA, especially now that all the states needed have ratified the ERA, including Illinois, and it has the attention of Congress for the first time in many years. Zoe will not rest until the ERA is adopted into the U.S. Constitution, and even then she won't rest because she will then turn her attention to making sure that it is enforced. It is for those reasons and more I am so proud that the Women's Advisory Board in the City of West Hollywood is honoring Zoe Nicholson for Women's History Month. Zoe is not only a resident of West Hollywood, but we are lucky to have her as an extended member of our community. And that makes it all the more momentous to celebrate her today. So please join me in honoring Zoe and in celebrating all that she has done and continues to do.
Don't tell anyone in Long Beach, but this is my favorite council chamber. This is where I debuted Tea with Alice and Me. This is where one of my best friends serves the community. And you may know, or you may not, that on the day the Equal Rights Amendment deadline occurred, June 30th, 1982, God sent me all I needed. God sent me the continuation. God sent me the sequel. God sent me Lindsay Horvath that very day. You know, we're going to have the Equal Rights Amendment. It's going to be part of the Constitution as soon as the archivist gets directions to accept that 38th state that ratified. And I'm pleased to say that other states are now coming on. No, I won't rest when that happens. I'll rest after I die. I suppose at that point it will be mandatory. But I believe with all my heart that when the United States Constitution includes all Americans, we'll be a much better country. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And now we shall have our public comment. Our public comment period is limited to 20 minutes. We take comments on the consent calendar and also on items not on our agenda. However, we cannot take action on items that are not listed on tonight's agenda. We don't have a terrific number of speakers, but we will be starting with Susan Shannon on item 2R and followed by Kevin Burton on 2O.
Hi, I'm Susie Shannon. I'm the Policy Director for the Rental Affordability Act, which is coming up today for a vote. I just wanted to thank you very much in advance for supporting this. As all of you know, rent control is a serious issue, and unfortunately right now our city council members and county supervisors cannot enact or expand rent control. And so what the Rental Affordability Act does is to make sure that we repeal that part of Costa-Hawkins to allow our local governments to once again enact or expand rent control and also to apply vacancy controls. There are over 30% of our renters in California pay over 50% of their income in rent. We have record homelessness. When I originally drafted SB 1380, which put the state of California on a housing first model, we had 115,000 people who were homeless in the state of California, and now we have over 150,000. So we need to do something about our housing crisis, and we would really appreciate the city of West Hollywood being part of that solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If I may,
Mrs.
Mayor, I
Shannon,
just want
please.
to commend Ms. Shannon for her work that she does in addressing the issue of homelessness. It's actually her full-time job, and I think her life's calling. So thank you for being here tonight.
Yes, thank you. Kevin Burton to be followed by Chad Kroger.
Good evening, Council. I just want to state my support for item 2O, staff's recommendation that the temporary measures to improve pedestrian safety along Fountain Avenue be made permanent. I bicycled here almost the entire length from the east side to La Cienega on the way to the meeting tonight on Fountain Avenue. And given the street design that encourages high speeds in West Hollywood, these measures have significantly increased safety of pedestrians crossing the side streets and especially crossing Fountain Avenue at night, whereas before they were essentially shadows in the night and difficult to see. Now there are flashing lights along the crosswalks. They are heavily used. So I live on the east side. I bicycle and walk there all the time. I can tell you, if you're not familiar with it, they're used all the time. And also I support staff's recommendation and that of the Transportation Commission that the bulb outs that extend into Fountain Avenue be retained as painted bulb outs with bollards rather than solid curb extensions which force bicyclists out into traffic, which is not a good thing on Fountain Avenue if they otherwise can be moving closer to the curb. It's also inconvenient for motorists to have slower bicycles forced out into traffic. So it'd be great if those can be retained as painted with bollards in those locations. And especially where measures have been taken to discourage or prevent crossing Fountain Avenue on residential streets and encouraging motorists to use the signalized crossings significantly improve the safety of motorists to reduce the number of violent collisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. Those were super helpful comments. Chad Kroger to be followed by Mike Carter.
Dude.
What up, Council? My name is Chad Kroger. Council, one of the things I love about America is that we celebrate holidays, especially the ones where we honor our heroes. Days like President's Day, Veterans Day, and Martin Luther King Day are all super sick. The one day of celebration I beef with, though, is Labor Day, the day where we honor those who have jobs. Massive respect to those legends, but what about the people who don't have jobs? Should they not be honored? Some of the coolest people in this country choose not to work. For example, my dog Serge Quinones. He's gotten really good at breakdancing. He knows a ton about the band Sublime, and he's dated 3 chicks named Amanda. The best thing about Serge, though, is that if you're ever feeling not stoked, you can sit in the back of his van and vent. He's a really good listener, and he usually parks at 8069 Detroit Street, so I encourage you all to cruise sometime, but look out for street sweeping on Fridays. Or my buddy Chance Motherway. He's such a sweet dude. He brews beers in his mom's pool house, and coolest thing about Chance He gives those brews away pro bono. Or myself, excluding my activism, I'm currently not employed by anyone but the sun, the beach, and my bros. So, yeah, we all pursue our passions. And I think we need a day to celebrate free spirits. So that is why I'm petitioning that we have a non-Labor Day, a holiday dedicated to those who don't work. And how do we honor those who don't work? Well, I'm thinking we could have, first everyone gets a day off, then everyone crushes brews, and then we have a fat cookout. So, yeah, what do you guys think? Cool?
Thank you,
All right, I'll
Mr.
take that.
Kroger.
I'll take that silence as a yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe last month we made a list of possible holidays the city might celebrate. We could add that to the list without objection for review. Thank you. Michael Carter, to be followed by Tai Sunanen.
How do I follow that? I'm Mike Carter. I'm a West Hollywood resident, and I want to bring to the attention of City Council that our city lies adjacent to the great coastal roosting area of the monarch butterfly and smack dab within the great breeding and feeding grounds of their epic 3,000-mile migratory path. Efforts to save the monarch are underway nation, region, state, and county-wide. New York City proposes an 8-story commercial structure devoted to monarch roosting and feeding. In all, there are 44 sanctuary sites in LA County, but it's not enough because the monarch population has declined by 94% since the 80s. That's a decline from 4.5 million to 29,000 in California. Monarchs are destined this year to join the casualty list of other species already on the U.S. endangered species list. We can join to integrate monarch butterfly conservation into the city's future land use and planning efforts, reestablish native milkweed and nectar plants, investigate possible monarch sanctuary sites, and convert temporarily abandoned lands to monarch habitat, proclaiming that our city is committed to monarch preservation. Once incentivized, and I repeat, once incentivized, because I brought this up at the Art on the Outside subcommittee last week, the muralization of the East Side with kaleidoscopes of monarchs will help encourage, support, and give momentum to citywide efforts until we host our own Butterfly Festival. The survival of life forms other than our own is coming to a screeching halt faster than at any time in geologic history. We are the predator in charge of this massive extinction. What better cause is there to create a reputation of our own as a city sanctuary for this disappearing and essential pollinator? And so I ask, what can you do, please, each one of you, to make these things happen? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Tai Sunanen, to be followed by J.T. Parr.
Good evening, Council. Tai Sunanen, West Hollywood, Second Lieutenant, United States Air Force, March Air Reserve Base in Riverside. This is a very brief PSA. Exactly 1 month ago, our base housed and quarantined a flight of individuals who were coming from China. I can tell you today, as a way to calm both the public and what we know here in the military, this is 1, not a pandemic. 2, there is no cause to be concerned, and the reason being is because as of 3 weeks ago, the epicenter in China has faced a decline in all new cases of COVID-19. And 3, we have every reason to believe, while you will continue to hear this in the news, it will get better. We have all the capacity at major hospitals here in Los Angeles County, all military bases, to contain such a spread of the virus, if that were to be the case. The other piece I wanted to share was we are continuing to ask the public to please do 3 things. Number 1, do not buy face masks because we need that for the medical hospitals, unless you are 1, a caretaker for a senior citizen who might be facing symptoms of a cold or flu, or 2, that your job requires it. We're also asking the public to be aware of the 3 symptoms, which include fever, cough, and heavy breathing, but they do overlap with the common flu. And 3, we're asking the public to First and foremost, wash your hands. That is the best way to mitigate the coronavirus, and to cover your mouth when coughing, unless, of course, you're passing 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and by all means, cough away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sunanan. J.T. Parr to be followed by Larry Block.
What up, Council? I'm JT Parr. I also don't have a job. And I agree with Chad that we need a day to celebrate people who value chillin' over billin'. We want this day to be perfect, which is why we need an official rule set for beer pong. I think we can all relate to the frustration of going to someone's crib and having to debate how we're gonna play. We need a unified rule system. After extensive research throughout OC, SD, and the Inland Empire, I think the rules should be as follows. 10 cups, 3 beers, 2 re-racks, no mid-round re-rack, no blowing or scooping. Have a solid line established for elbow violations, although this one is tough to adjudicate. Spiders allowed, no rebuttal shot off a double make, no ad hominem attacks, and just out of etiquette, no smacking the table. Thank you so much, Council.
Thank you very much. Larry Block to be followed by Beverly Kenworthy.
Larry Block, West Hollywood. The first thing I'd like to mention is that the closed caption is not working again tonight, and I've heard some complaints about that. Anyway, hello everybody. Tonight I speak on behalf of the Public Facilities Commission, and I'm very excited about our first ever Green City Awards. The purpose of the Green City Awards is to reward a business and recognize a West Hollywood resident, a West Hollywood business, a West Hollywood nonprofit who does something big or small to help out our environment and to recognize and build on those ideas for the future. There are 3 awards, one for an individual, one for a business, and one for an organization or nonprofit or school. The nomination period is now, and it ends on March 31st with the Green City Awards right here at the City Council chambers on May 13th. What an honor it would be, whoever does receive the first Green City Award presented by the City of West Hollywood. I've been listening and learning for so many years from so many of you about your vision of sustainability, bike connectivity, waste management, trees, parks, preservation and protection, and now it's time for you to select and recognize your peers and celebrate and share and grow those ideas for a greener future in West Hollywood. The nomination forms are online at WehoTV.org, and the Public Facility Commission meets March 13th at City Hall at 6:30 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Block. Beverly Kenworthy is our last speaker. If anyone else wishes to speak, please turn in a slip while Ms. Kenworthy is speaking.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. I'm glad to be here. I wanted to just ask you to think about maybe delaying a vote on the new Michael Weinstein initiative, which we refer to as Prop 10 2.0. You know, the California Apartment Association worked very earnestly this past year and made a lot of compromises to get 1482 passed. And we think that was a significant bill and significant for our state. And because of that, you know, we have a very robust list of people who are now opposing this new initiative by Mr. Weinstein. We have 12 affordable housing developers and providers who are opposed to this, and a number of the building trades. We have the State Building and Construction Trades Council, the California State Association of Electrical Workers, IEBEW, and the LA Orange County Construction Trades Council. I mean, our list is like, it's 3 pages long. There's still not been a ton of analysis on this bill and what it would cost to the state. And I think what's so concerning about it is that if there are problems with it, the only way to change it is with another initiative. There are a number of things still going on in Sacramento that are looking to tackle our affordability crisis, our homelessness crisis, and, you know, we need to stop confusing rent control with affordable housing. It definitely helps some, but it doesn't help everybody. And I think it's time to come up with a better solution. And so I would urge you to at least delay for a while and, see how these campaigns play out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kenworthy. That is our final public speaker. Comments from council members? John, Lauren, anyone?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll go first. Just a few comments. First of all, I wanted to wish a happy birthday to Sal Guriello, wherever he is. Today is Sal's birthday, and I just always remember to commemorate his date of birth. He was quite a character up here on the city council for many years, so happy birthday to the old man. Please note, City Clerk, my no vote on item 2G. That's the parklets item. I didn't vote for the parklets, and I wish to continue to vote against them. I just don't think it's a great use of parking spaces along Santa Monica Boulevard or Sunset. I can't imagine why anybody would want to relax 3 feet away from buses going by at 30 miles per hour and being exposed to auto emissions and auto fumes. So I just think it's not a great idea for a city as dense and as busy as we are, and I think we could make better use of those parking spaces. A reminder to everybody that Sunday, first of all, is daylight savings time, so remember to spring forward and set your clocks ahead an hour. It's also, however, the LA Marathon, and the LA Marathon comes through West Hollywood every year, and it comes down the Sunset Strip and then cuts down San Vicente. And those of you who live in the impacted area know that we get trapped that morning, depending on what side of the marathon you find yourself on. It's always strategic to think the night before, if you have to go somewhere that Sunday morning, to move your car to the other side of the marathon, because once the marathon's happening, it's not possible sometimes to get out of your neighborhood or to get to where you need to go. So just like myself, just be strategic. If you need to be somewhere Sunday morning, think about where to park your car the night before. The last thing I wanted to mention is I think one of the continuing issues that we're having with our homelessness issue is the emptying out of trash bins along many of our busy streets. Often walking up to a trash bin on Santa Monica Boulevard or Sunset, it's apparent to me that the reason that there's so much refuse and garbage around the trash bin is that it has been emptied out by somebody looking for food. Unfortunately, I think when people are mentally ill and sometimes psychotic and hungry, that they're desperate enough to dig through the garbage cans to look for a meal. It's not sanitary, it's not safe, it's not decent. We have other food sources available for homeless people. And the net effect is that our residents and businesses are then forced to confront the reality that there's trash strewn all over our major boulevards where people need to walk and function. So I think we need to look at, one time we looked at trash bins that were one-way only. The big mouths is what they were called. And maybe we need to look along our major corridors at trash cans that cannot be easily accessed for food. They shouldn't be anyway. But even worse, it really leads to a feeling of chaos. It's the broken windows theory, that when there's trash thrown all over Santa Monica Boulevard or Sunset or any other major corridor, people don't think twice about adding to the trash on the street. So I'd like us to explore, if I can ask the city manager or Oscar, the director of public works, to look at what it would take to upgrade. If my colleagues, if we need to vote on it, I'll bring an item forth, but I think that one of the ways to curtail the amount of garbage and trash on our major boulevards is to think about one-way cans on our garbage bins. They shouldn't be accessed for survival anyway. So that's just my thought on tonight's meeting, and those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lauren?
Yeah, sure. So since our last meeting, I attended the West Side Urban Forum, which featured West Side mayors from Santa Monica, Culver City, Beverly Hills, and West Hollywood, and subjects such as transportation, housing, and local control were talked about, and I just want to thank Mayor D'Amico for representing us so well. I'd like to, on the consent calendar, note my no vote to 2D as in dog about the ordinance on contributions. And then on 2O regarding making the traffic calming measures on Fountain permanent, I just want to say amen. That's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Heilman.
Thank you, Mayor. I have comments on 2 consent calendar items. One is 2G, the parklet item. I'm supportive. I thank staff for the update and the report, but I share some of my colleagues' concerns about the parklets on Santa Monica Boulevard, the one we had on Sunset. I really don't think they work on a major boulevard. The ones that seem to be successful are the ones that are on the side street. The one on Havenhurst in particular, I think we should also ask our staff to look at perhaps changing the rules. We had kind of a rule that, or informal rule, I believe, that didn't allow the adjacent business to be serving people in those areas. I think that's what makes those little parklets successful, is if there's an adjacent business that is taking that on as almost their space. It's a public space, but we should allow the business to use it for customers and encourage that, because I think that's actually helpful. So I'm hoping that staff will look at those ideas as we move forward. I also had comments on 2O, which is the Fountain Avenue improvements. I want to thank staff for doing that and bringing this forward. I think this is really an improvement, and it shows that those improvements work. But I want to make sure that as we go forward, we really think very carefully about putting in crosswalks without a full signal there. Even with the pedestrian-oriented signal, there are people who don't stop, and people are not used to stopping when they see flashing lights. I've seen people just run through them even though there are lights flashing, and sometimes lights are flashing even though no one is crossing. So I think that needs to be looked at as we move forward. And going forward, I hope we won't put in crosswalks without them being signalized from the very beginning. And those are my only comments tonight.
Councilmember Heilman, did you wish to make that adjustment on the use of the neighboring space inside the parklet as part of direction to staff, or do you just want them to investigate it?
This is still being evaluated, and I think in the upcoming year, I would just ask them to evaluate that and whether it makes sense to shift the program and only allow these off the major streets on side streets.
Okay, I was talking about the other part about businesses being able to serve their guests.
Yes, I would ask them to look at that, and if it makes sense, come back to us with a recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Since our last meeting, I attended the California Contract Cities Association board meeting and the Sanitation District Personnel Committee meeting. Clean Power Alliance hosted a Sustainable Energy Incubator Resilience and Clean Energy Future Symposium, and I participated along with a variety of industry leaders, other elected officials, and those who are focused on our clean energy future. And I think it's very important that to share that our energy provider of record now in West Hollywood is committed to resilience in a clean energy future, that the concerns from some folks that focusing on clean energy as our future will lead us to some of the energy issues of the past, and quite to the contrary, we learned that is not what's in our future. In fact, more resilience, more reliability, and more opportunity for a green future is a good one for all of us. So They are working on it, and it's good to be a part of Clean Power Alliance. I attended the Destination Crenshaw groundbreaking, which was really exciting, and hopefully once we have the Crenshaw Northern Extension up to West Hollywood, we'll be able to visit Destination Crenshaw on a regular basis, not by car, but by train. And in fact, there is a motion this coming Wednesday morning at LA City Council to further our partnership with the City of Los Angeles in working on all of our efforts to bring Metro to West Hollywood, formalizing our ability to work with their staff and other things. I want to thank our staff for working with their staff to make this happen. And if you're excited about that, it's happening Wednesday morning at LA City Council. I want to take a minute to say a few things about Zoe Nicholson, who, as you might have guessed from her comments, is a personal friend. But sometimes they tell you don't meet your heroes, and in Zoe's case, I met her and she became mine. She's a millennial at heart. In fact, she was the person who hounded me and hounded me and hounded me to get on Facebook and told me I wouldn't have as bright of a future in my community if I didn't know how to communicate with people online. And I told her at one point if I heard one more thing about being on social media, that was going to be it for our friendship. So we sort of have modeled an intergenerational friendship in the funniest of ways. But she's also a tech expert and has, in the past 10 years, managed more than 27 websites personally on her own from her home. She was recently profiled by Ann Curry on PBS. We'll meet again about her journey working on the Equal Rights Amendment. Her books, Hungry Heart and Matri, are my favorite, but she is a well-known author, and she also is known as a disruptor in many cases. She was a don't ask, don't tell disruptor, even in the face of President Obama, making sure that that issue continued to move forward, much to the chagrin of some who would have liked it to be on a different timeline. She was out there fighting the fight, and just really proud of her for that. She also, as a member of the Veteran Feminists of America, walked out of a meeting when they said that women of other generations couldn't participate. And I think what I admire most about her example as a younger person, not young exactly anymore, but as a younger person, is her commitment to making sure the next generation really understands and knows our history. She's invested herself in making sure that rising generations of feminists, of LGBTQ plus community have someone to go to, and for that I'm deeply grateful that Zoe exists, that she's a part of our community, and that we as a city have chosen to honor her as part of Women's History Month. Also, there are other women getting awards from LA County. The LA County Women's History Month Awards are taking place next Monday. If you are interested in going to that event, ticket sales close tomorrow. So if you didn't know about it, go check it out online. And it's happening at the Millennium Biltmore at lunch. It's a luncheon event with the county supervisors and the LA County Women's Commission. And finally, tomorrow is Election Day. If you haven't already voted, and make sure you do so. I want to give a special thank you to our city clerk and her whole staff for making sure we had early voting election sites in West Hollywood. There were some questions about how it opened up, but as it went on, it went much more smoothly, and it really enabled people from all over the region to be able to vote in a way that was convenient and in an opportunity that made sense for them. So thank you for the work that you did to make that happen, because I know that was a big change this year. And I want to give a special comment to my friend, Pete Buttigieg, who retired from the race. While this isn't a place for politics, I think the historic nature of his candidacy especially has been very touching to hear from so many members of our community, people who came to me and said they never in their lifetime would have thought that they would have seen him be able to run, to see an openly gay man be able to be seriously considered for President of the United States, to win the Iowa caucuses, at one point to be a leader in delegates. It's history in the making, and I think Pete's conversation with that 9-year-old boy on the stage is everything that we had hoped for as a community, that his leadership would be and his example would be. So whatever your politics are, I think that we can all say Pete has truly made a difference for our community and beyond, and it's exciting to watch. Those are my comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. I just have two quick comments. The first is that, as Councilmember Meister said, I attended the West Side Urban Forum mayor's discussion. The West Side cities, more alike than we are different, but we have differences, and just in case you wondered, our differences are better than theirs. And I wanted to just reach out on behalf of the council to the city manager and the public and talk about the coronavirus. We have several large public events in our city, Halloween, Gay Pride, and smaller regular events like this. And our city is following the LA County Department of Health Services regulations and recommendations, and we encourage anyone and all of you, if you have questions, to contact the LA County Department of Health Services or contact our city, and we can help get you that information. And if the city manager has more information, I'm sure he will provide it. But I think there is certainly reason to pay attention and to do what we can to protect our residents going forward. So we're committed to doing that. So thank you. And now, city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Just a couple of brief items to report on. Our Building and Safety Division right now is working on an earthquake brace and bolt program. We have registration through March 19th that provides owners of a certain type of single-family home up to a $3,000 grant for strengthening their foundations. They can find more information on this at weho.org/seismic. As mentioned earlier, we will have street closures this Sunday for the LA Marathon. I think we have a couple people here who are running it. I know Councilmember Heilman's running and John Kehoe's going to be running, so run real fast. Also mentioned earlier is daylight savings time. Just a quick update to add a little bit to what the mayor said regarding the coronavirus. The city right now follows its agency leads, which is the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health and the CDC in regards to protocols for public spaces and messaging to the community. Staff in our social service division has been participating in telebriefings coordinated by Los Angeles County, and our communications department is pushing out this information both from LA County and the CDC. As said earlier from one of the well-versed speakers, there's no need right now to panic, and all public administrators should await CDC guidance before canceling any events or closing schools. In that regard, we are also reaching out and connecting with our local schools. The city has plans in place for emergency management and continuity of business. This is part of our EOC standards and our drills that we do on a regular basis. In regards to other briefings that we've been providing to council, our social service division has been the lead on this particular area, providing information to the city council and the executive team. If there's additional questions or comments from the council at this time, it's really a wait and see. We do have a major event this weekend, and at this time, it's all green lights for the marathon. The request from Councilmember Duran regarding the trash receptacles in our commercial districts, all you need to do is ask. You don't have to do a staff report. We have 50 new big bellies that are being installed as part of our streetscape program. This includes big bellies at all of the bus stops on Sunset, and we're going to be adding additional ones along Santa Monica Boulevard. That concludes my report.
All right, big bellies for everyone. The fiscal impact on the consent calendar, City Clerk.
Tonight's fiscal impact with the removal of item 2I is $847,149 in expenditures, $16,000 in potential revenue, and $6,300 in waived fees.
All right, we have a motion to adopt from Councilmember Duran, seconded by Councilmember Meister. Marking your votes with all exceptions already noted, it passes 5-0. We will now move on to item 4A, which is the Sunset Strip Gateway Design Framework. John Kehoe, Robin Eason, Brian Eck, Garen Yolis. Welcome, Garen. I noticed that we have one speaker. I know we all have our report. I think there's probably some interesting graphics, but I think we also know what we probably want to say. So bear that in mind. Yes, yeah.
Good evening, City Council and Mayor. Garen Yalis with the Long Range Planning Division. So this evening we're providing an update on the Sunset Strip Gateway Concepts Framework. Just a little bit of background. Back in October 2017, our Innovations Division presented to the Council an option for moving forward with a pilot for a gateway on the Strip. At the time, the Council requested that the former Street Media Subcommittee meet with staff separately to discuss other options for gateways on the Strip. Staff has since met with the Street Media Subcommittee and has been working with Gale Studio to develop a framework for what gateways can be on the Strip, including something that is not only a standalone sign, but could be a destination for people on the Strip. And so we have been presenting, meeting with the subcommittee as well as the Sunset Business Improvement District to review the draft framework. The goal of the framework is really to, as I mentioned, to create gateway markers that could go beyond standalone signs, could become a visual identity for the Strip and invite more people to be there and create more places that are destinations outside of existing destinations on the Strip. So the framework that's included in Attachment A of the staff report identifies conceptual gateway components for 3 gateway locations: a western gateway, which is Sunset and Doheny Road, an eastern gateway, which is Sunset Marmont Lane, and we looked at a north-south gateway as you're going up Sunset, so that Sunset and La Cienega as an opportunity for a marker at that location. The conceptual framework are kit of parts. They don't, they're not designs. They don't look at specific designs, locations, or arrangements, but ideas of what that gateway can be. So as I mentioned, we have the Eastern Gateway. We're recommending developing a concept design for a vertical gateway option at this location. For on the Western Gateway, we're recommending similarly a vertical gateway option for this location. And for the North-South Gateway at Sunset La Cienega, we're looking at developing concept designs for a vertical and horizontal option at this location. Briefly, the timeline. So tonight, the City Council is being asked to authorize Phase 1 of this project, which would authorize staff to release a request for qualifications to invite design firms to give us their credentials. We would then select up to 3 design firms to develop gateway concepts based on that framework that was developed by Gale Studio, and that would entail a public presentation of the concept designs and a preferred design that staff will take to the City Council, anticipated in September, to get approval for the subsequent phases of the project. Phase 2, 3, and 4 would include schematics, design development for the 3 gateways, and we would have a better estimate of what those costs would be for Phase 3 and 4 as we get more clear of what the design could be. Here's a summary of the recommendations. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions before we hear from our member of the public?
I'll wait until the public comment.
All right. Genevieve Morel is our only speaker, I believe. There she is.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Genevieve Morrell, President and CEO of the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. I serve as ex officio or affiliate on the Sunset Strip Business Improvement District, and I know we've had many presentations and conversations about the gateway signage, and we just encourage you to move forward. It's something that we're really excited about on Sunset Strip to really start to develop more of a real identity for the Strip. Not that it hasn't had one already, but we want to make sure that it moves with the evolution of the Strip and represents that, as well as all the other things that staff is working so diligently on, like creating pedestrian-friendly sort of experiences and lighting, et cetera. So we really encourage you. Gateway signage is so important for this city, and I know you all have been working on that for quite a while. So thank you, and we hope you support this item.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Heilman?
Yeah, thank you for bringing this forward. I want to make sure I understand what is the concept for the east side and the west side, and then I have some particular concerns about what I believe the concept is for La Cienega. So on both sides, you're really looking at a vertical marker that would recognize the entry into West Hollywood, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm fine with that because there's a lot of other stuff that was talked about here, and Gail has been our consultant, and I think you remember what I think about the polka dots on the sidewalk. The La Cienega concept seems to be more than just a marker, but there would be some kind of plaza area where people could sit with a view of La Cienega and down the hill. Going back to our discussion about the parklets, and as somebody who lives on La Cienega, no one wants to sit in the sidewalk at the intersection of La Cienega and Sunset. It's just not an environment that would be pleasant for anyone unless they're somehow removed from the sidewalk and above the sidewalk. And what it looks like to me here is that you would have people kind of sitting in front of Pink Dot. And again, the volumes of traffic there, that's just not really going to be a desirable environment. So I don't know if we are actually approving that aspect of the concept because it just doesn't seem realistic to me.
Yeah, so for the La Cienega Sunset, the project right adjacent to that location is already proposing a extension of the sidewalk, so a little plaza area with that new project that's coming in. So we would be proposing a gateway marker that's incorporated into that area and potentially seating, and not necessarily all of the components that are included in the framework, but have something there because of that expanded space.
But that hasn't yet been approved, correct? That project?
It has been approved, yes.
Okay, so that's a private development that was approved by the planning staff or commission? And
the commission.
Okay, but it didn't get appealed to council. So I have to say, again, my reluctance is that when we create these little mini plaza areas that are supposed to be such a great public amenity, but we do it at a location where no one really wants to sit, it becomes a gathering place for problems. And I'm all in favor of public spaces and expanding our public spaces, but I'm not sure that this is going to work. I'd like us to just focus on the vertical marker, and that's my reaction to this.
Councilmember Duran.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few comments about the Sunset Strip signage. So this is something that I've been trying to work on for 20 years, so we're finally here. I'm glad we're here, and I'm glad we're finally moving forward with the RFQ. Just a couple of notes that I want to make now, and I'm going to make again and again as we go through the process. One is the site that my colleague John Heilman was just talking about, the La Cienega Sunset area. Part of the history of the Strip, this is where the mobsters used to have their secret meetings for their secret gambling that would occur. Where the Pink Dot now sits, that used to be where Mickey Cohen and Bugsy Siegel and the gangsters had their hidden gambling casinos. Just a FYI about the history of Sunset. And I don't know if that's an opportunity to play with art or something else to acknowledge the fact that even during Prohibition, the city was alive and well with its notorious theme. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to come up with one word that identifies the Sunset Strip, and the word came back notorious. I think that was about 8 or 9 years ago now that we came up with that one word. And I think that's really important to recognize because some of the things, even that we do here at City Council and City Government, I think fail to recognize the history of this being a place for outliers and people who never fit in the norm. As far as the eastern end and the western end, the one common thread that constantly exists in my head for Sunset is music. Music has been a constant component for 100 years on the Sunset Strip, and on the eastern end, the Players Club, which is now Pink Taco, was the site where Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack used to congregate. And I don't know if there's any opportunity to recognize that portion of the history of the Strip at a time when this was the playground for Hollywood, that Hollywood stars would come by, and across the street is where it used to be, oh my gosh, now I'm blanking, the famous, notorious place where they paved over Paradise and put up a parking lot. Come.
Garden of Allah?
Thank you, the Garden of Allah. Yes, thank you, Lindsay. The Garden of Allah used to be, but it was Hollywood's playground, the eastern end of the Sunset Strip. And so I don't know if there's an opportunity to capture that in neon or design or art, but that's a really important distinction of the eastern end compared to the western end, which is where I live, and the western end, of course, being the rock and roll district, which now has, believe it or not, almost 50 years of history under its belt. It goes back everything from the Mamas and the Papas to Sonny and Cher to Jefferson Airplane to the Doors and everything else that happened on the western end. And so I understand the need for Sunset to continue to evolve and to become whatever it's going to become, but at least I want to try to capture the notion that music and the production of music, Geffen Records getting started on the Sunset Strip, Bing Crosby's recording studio on the Sunset Strip, the rock and roll clubs, the 1940s music, the breaking of the racial barrier with Lena Horne and Sammy Davis Jr. I mean, so many things happened around music and nightclub that I just want to, I'm going to emphasize it now because I imagine whoever gets the RFQ, they're going to watch this. So I'm saying it now to get ahead of, myself. But hopefully, in coming back with signage, there's a way to capture some of these ideas and some of these concepts about what makes Sunset so unique for 100 years. Thank you.
Councilmember Meister.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm good with this, and I agree with my colleague that anything we can do to activate and also incorporate our history as well as our future, I think, is what will make the Sunset Strip continue on. I did have a question about, on page 7, it says the teams will be asked to identify alternative funding strategies for implementation of the proposed gateway designs. Can you explain that a little bit? It's on page 7 of the staff report.
Maybe the question is that code words for advertising?
No, it wouldn't be advertising. It would be potential partnerships with an arts organization or of that sort to see if there's any kind of programming and things like that, but it wouldn't be off-site advertising if that was a question. And then additional opportunities with the arts and advertising program. I think they're currently in the process of reviewing those proposals, and if there's opportunities to program or have that digital billboard be able to fund or potential funding opportunities for the gateways.
So then I would just say that as the teams look for that, to again think about historic preservation, and maybe there are some organizations that would like to get involved with that.
I would just say that I agree in part with my colleagues to my far right and my far left. I actually, if there are people watching this, I hope you don't reference the history of the Sunset Strip in making these entrances to the city. I think that the sort of looking at nostalgia as a way to define the future of the city is in some way counterproductive to my idea of what these should be. I understand that a lot has happened here, and I think there are better ways to mark the history of the cultural life of the city than to take a static object and devote it to that. So I'm concerned, and I hope that somehow the smart folks who take on this challenge can balance, or really just do it my way, to not focus so much on nostalgia. And to the question about the La Cienega Gateway, I think what's important is that the change in this streetscape to a plaza means that we will have sort of a built-in environment, and the change of the building to have that sort of face that now faces down La Cienega, I think will change dramatically what's seen at the top of the hill from Beverly and Third and Melrose and Santa Monica, and vice versa, the opportunity to look off into the distance. I mean, we have protected our views through our SSP, through our developments, and this is sort of reverse engineering a view into the Sunset Strip. And so I think the change to the shape of the traffic, the requirement that this become more of a right turn than a sort of veering off up the street will slow down traffic and make it a much more interesting place to be. So I think that's in fact, I'm most excited about that one because I think it will engage people more than the other two, which I'm afraid will be fairly static. And finally, I just want to say that for the Eastern Gateway, I would like to be on the record that putting it to the east of the famous billboard that once held the Marlboro Man and now holds the Apple, it seems to me that it should in fact align with that. And then there's not competing, because our first instruction is don't compete with the billboards, and yet you're telling them to put a vertical element in front of one of our most famous billboards. So I don't know if that's incongruent with the sort of bubbly diagram you have, but I think all the other things, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, can happen if one moves 100 yards to the west. But that, you know, other people may have an opinion about that other than just me. Councilmember Meister?
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, then I would suggest that maybe, you know, if whoever responds to these RFPs can make a case for a horizontal rather than a vertical at that site, then maybe they should be allowed to do that. Let's not stifle, you know, the creativity.
Certainly, yeah, I'm absolutely in agreement with that. All right, so no more comments. We have a motion to adopt, seconded by John Duran, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Horvath. It passes 5-0. Thank you all very much for your very hard work on this. I know it's been a long time coming, and there's a lot more to do. Item 4B is our next item. Autonomous personal delivery devices pilot program. I'm hoping someone will roll that robot down the aisle and deliver some waters, but I'm guessing that's not going to happen. I guess, Bob, you're going to make the presentation.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Bob Chung, Senior Transportation Planner. The item before you tonight is the consideration of a pilot program to test personal delivery devices, or AKA autonomous robots. Back in May, Council directed staff to issue a request for information and select a partner company, a delivery company, and do outreach to various boards and commissions. Staff and Postmates have conducted outreach to 6 boards and commissions, including the Chamber of Commerce, Transportation Commission, Disability Advisory Board, Senior Advisory Board, Public Safety Commission, and the Public Facilities Commission. The feedback that we got were pretty down the middle. Half of those who expressed support and the other half expressed concern on this pilot program. Those who expressed support like the innovative part of the program. Also, they support less delivery trips, which will curb some of the tailpipe emissions and congestion and double parking in the city. Those who expressed concern cited some of the issues with our sidewalks, the lack of width to accommodate these robots, the interaction with pedestrians, dogs, children. Also, they pose potential obstacles for those with mobility challenges, including seniors and disabled people. Also, some of the concerns regarding robots can't deliver to apartments, they can't go upstairs or elevators. Also, some merchants may not be interested in using robot deliveries as well. So based on these comments and concerns, staff has put together eight different recommendations should the City Council decide to proceed with the pilot program. These recommendations include prohibit the use of robots on substandard sidewalks, so that includes Fountain Avenue and Romaine Street. Limit the number of PDDs to 3, a maximum of 3. Also provide monthly updates to the Transportation Commission. This will provide continuous monitoring as well as offer the public a chance to weigh in on the pilot program. Also allow for merchants and customers to opt out to the use of the robots. Limit the use of the PDDs to daytime only, so no nighttime deliveries. Also provide the city with monthly data usage of the PDDs, and also provide a chaperone to oversee each of the PDDs during the 3-month pilot program. And that concludes my presentation.
One quick question before we hear from the public. Is this pilot program or service like this available in other cities, anywhere in?
I believe the city of Los Angeles has a program in Hollywood.
Okay.
That's the only one I know of.
Okay. Maybe if there's a member of the public who works with these in Hollywood, you could give us some information about that. All right. Speakers this evening, Yola Doré, to be followed by Joshua Franco, and then Mr. Arturo Gonzalez.
Good evening, Council. Yola Doré, West Hollywood. In the Americans with Disabilities Act, we fought for many years for access to engage in public meetings like this, access to be able to get into homes, businesses, to have a job. We fought for access to education. It took a long time, but finally, in the 90s, the Americans with Disabilities Act was ratified. It is a federal law. The reason I bring this up is when these devices are placed on the sidewalk, initially, this gentleman is telling us they will have someone with them. But after that time, there won't be someone with them. My concerns are this, that I was told that the device would know you're there when you're both walking on the sidewalk. That's great, it knows you're there, but who goes first when you go around it? It doesn't know that. And so that means a mother with a baby, a person with a disability such as mine, someone that's visually impaired, etc. I could go on. is there, and they have to walk on the grassy area or in the street, and then the robot proceeds with the delivery. Is a delivery in our city with a device like that important, or are our citizens? I give you that, and that's the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Torre. Joshua Franco to be followed by Arturo Gonzalez.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. My name is Joshua Franco. I actually work here in West Hollywood. I'm addressing you tonight to support the Postmates Automated Delivery Robot Serve pilot program. In doing so, I believe the project will contribute to West Hollywood's reputation as an innovative and technology-driven city. In addition to that, I also believe that it will increase the reach of small businesses and the amount of those small businesses on the Postmates platform. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Joshua. Arturo Gonzalez to be followed by Christopher Fagan.
Good evening, distinguished council members, Mayor D'Amico. My name is Arturo Gonzalez, and I'm here today to urge your support and approval to Postmates Automotive Delivery Robot Serve pilot program. I want to share with you my experiences talking to general managers, employees of local restaurants during our outreach efforts, such as Tocaya Restaurant and many more. The response was positive, with a sense of excitement. We also walked your main streets, such as Santa Monica and Sunset, and talked to ordinary people whose response was also very, very positive. I can go on and share with you all the experiences of our outreach, but what really stuck in my mind was a server who said, this technology is ushering the future, and I'm glad I'm part of this moment in history. I wish we had a window where we can see the world that awaits us and see the innovative technology of tomorrow. Today, you have the opportunity to be that innovative force and usher this new technology. So I thank you for considering this innovative technology, and thank you for sharing this technology with your constituents. And I urge you to approve this technology. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gonzalez. Christopher Fagan to be followed by Kevin Burton.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Chris Fagan. I live in Los Angeles and work in West Hollywood. I'm addressing you tonight to support the Postmates Automated Delivery Robot Serve pilot program. Pilot program project will alleviate congestion by reducing the number of idling cars, which stand by, quite frankly, on the road all the time, vehicles on major streets, and also Postmates Serve has been designated with pedestrians in mind by using LiDAR, a type of radar, and sensors communicating with pedestrians. I think it will actually help, quite frankly, with congestion and vehicles in West Hollywood. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan. Kevin Burton and then Genevieve Morrill.
Good evening, Council. I'm Kevin Burton, a resident of West Hollywood. I'm speaking in support of this pilot project of the Postmates Automated Delivery Robots. You've probably seen one out in the lobby, very small box, putters along about 3 miles an hour. And Mayor D'Amico was asking for a comment from the public, member of the public who has interacted with one in Hollywood. You're looking at one. And I walked along. It didn't have a chaperone. Frankly, I don't think that's necessary even in the pilot. And interacted fine by stopping when there are obstacles. And in fact, one pedestrian, namely myself, stood in front of it, came to a stop, and then went around. So it seems to be programmed to recognize and interact appropriately, and it moves along at a speed about the speed I walk. So it's very slow, creates a lot of amusement by people. This is a useful opportunity for the city to be at the leading edge of emerging technologies, and it supplements what Postmates already does. You've probably seen them either in cars or motor scooters or bikes or pedestrians in their deliveries. I've seen all of these modes, and this is one additional mode that will help to reduce cars trying to find a place to park because the robot can putter along, and putter they do. With regard to the concern that disabled people, other pedestrians might have a problem with them, like I say, I didn't see any evidence of that. And likewise, this is a pilot to test that very sort of issue. There are only going to be 3 of them for the whole city, and I think the result will be positive for this kind of technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. Genevieve Morrill to be followed by Justin Easter.
Thank you, Mayor, Council people, Council members, Genevieve Morrill, CEO and President of the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. We're here in support of Postmates and this to support this multimodal environment that we have in our future. This pilot program is well thought out. Transportation Commission supported it. City staff has looked hard at this, understanding the restrictions of our community, et cetera. But I always hate going up against my dear friend and colleague, Yola Doré. So I want to kind of express to you something that Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Horvath said, which is looking at new energy and how new ways and old industries lead to new technology and new jobs. And this is part of that. And I want you to think about 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? Maybe not the best description of a world run by robots, but this was what our future was. And I want you to imagine a person coming down our sidewalks on their mobile phone, looking down, kind of weaving in and out, not looking up. And here comes Miss Doré down the sidewalk. This person's not looking up. I believe the humans are actually more of the problem of our ADA issues, of certain issues on our sidewalk, of not being responsible in the society. And I believe that these technologies actually are more responsible and more in tuned to move away from someone coming down the sidewalk in a wheelchair or someone that might be in front of them. And so I hope that you look to this as what it is. It's our future, and we should be at the lead and forefront of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morrill. Justin Easter, followed by Lauren Goldstein.
Hello, City Council members and Mayor and audience. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. You haven't seen me since the scooters, and I'm back. But I think that I'm here to support the SERVE program. I'm really excited to be here to speak about it. I think this is a really unique and unique experience, a unique opportunity for West Hollywood to be in the forefront of innovation. This is the type of technology, this is our future, and the fact that these people over here have done a lot of research, and it sounds like there's a lot of preparation for this, not only Postmates, but it sounds like we are ready for this pilot program. And I think that there are a lot of positives that can come out of this. Less cars on the road, we all know that we need that, less double parked cars. And Genevieve had a really great point. These people, including myself, walking on the street, looking right down their phone, way worse than a robot that has all these scanners and things that can actually see what's going on, stop, and allow someone to pass by. So I think that a lot of people already who have come up and have had some really great points, and I think that, again, we need to be in the forefront of, we have this opportunity to be the forefront of innovation, and that's really special, and I think, why not? This is West Hollywood. We can do anything, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Easter. Lauren Goldstein, and then Eric Rodriguez.
Hi, good evening. I'm here speaking as a resident of West Hollywood, and I work at the Chamber, as you know. These guys have put in so much work and thoughtfulness in testing these robots, all their presentations. They talk about, how, they will, if there is a disabled person, they're so involved with the community and the merchants, and they care about the feedback. And I personally use Postmates, and I'm very excited, so I ask that you support this pilot program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Goldstein. Eric Rodriguez and Vig Ganapathy.
Good evening, City and Council members. My name is Eric Rodriguez. I've been a resident for the City of West Hollywood for 3 years. I live in Holloway Drive, and I'm an avid user and customer of Postmates, and I know the problems that it creates with cars idling down. I try to save the Postmates delivery time by just meeting them down there, but I think this technology and your support behind it, and it's just only a 3-month program, so I think we should let it see itself through and come back to a decision, but I'm here to show my support, and I think it's a great idea and kind of excited for it. I hope you support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Vig Ganapathy, to be followed by Manny Rodriguez.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. This is Vignesh Ganapathy with Postmates. I want to thank you all on the forefront for working with us on a limited pilot to be able to test autonomous delivery devices within the city of West Hollywood. Your community input, as well as input that we've had from senior living facilities, disabled advocacy groups, has been instrumental in the way that we have been designing Serve from the wheels up. That includes everything from customer opt-outs, which were suggested by staff, as something that will actually be brought on the app at scale. So all of the millions of Postmates customers across the country will actually see that because of the work that West Hollywood has done in terms of the way this is designed. Additionally, the device itself has been designed in a way where it's able to display its intent and make sure that individuals are able to know which direction it's moving. Is it slowing down? Is it going to be stopping? Is it speeding up? Which are all instrumental in a new space in which we don't necessarily have a codex or a language to really understand the ways in which new technologies work. So for us, it's really been instrumental in making sure that we're designing with that in mind. You know, many people think of us as a lazy 2 a.m. burrito delivery service, but for us, our goal is to help brick and mortar retail be able to compete in an era of increasing e-commerce. And the way that we're able to connect them is with a number of modalities. You know, Kevin mentioned many of them earlier, but vehicles represent 80% of the automotive vehicles. Cars represent 80% of the vehicles that are used to make deliveries in West Hollywood. And nearly 10% of those deliveries take place in less than a mile. That means that there's a car that's stopping at one location looking for parking and then going and having to park in a second location in order to make that delivery. So this is just one important step to be able to drive that forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you go, if this passes, when do you think this would start? What's your timeline?
We'll be doing a little bit of product work, especially since the staff have asked for a customer opt-out, which requires us to actually redesign the app and send it out to our customers. So it would probably take at least about a month of lead time in order to get there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rodriguez, followed by Saul Yamani.
Hi, Manny Rodriguez, West Hollywood. I assume you've all read the attachment A by Postmates. It is really completely out of touch with reality. Postmates actually talks itself out of this idea when you read this. And it's actually not a good idea. It says there is no reason to move a 2-pound burrito 2 miles in a 2-ton vehicle. When I want my burrito from Bossa Nova, I want it delivered hot lickety-split by a guy in a bicycle or a car, and I want it delivered to my door. It also says that it will avoid 4-foot sidewalks. Most every residential street in West Hollywood is a 4-foot sidewalk. Postmates says it will improve air quality and reduce traffic congestion. Really? They need hundreds of these robots all over the sidewalks to do that, and that's a lot of electricity use also. It also says it will reduce double parking by delivery vehicles. I have an idea. Bicycles in the bike lanes. They're human-powered and use no electricity. I could go on, but you've read this attachment. The bottom line is that considering what we all know about motorized vehicles, autonomous or otherwise, slow, medium, or fast, the pedestrian experience must be protected, and the pedestrian confidence in that last available human path should never be compromised. We shouldn't be forced to adapt to unnecessary things, and you don't need to pilot a bad idea. But maybe the worst thing about this item is that poor Bob Chung will never get the time back he spent working on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Saul Yamami to be followed by Larry Block.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. Good to see you all. If you would have asked me what's the most, I'm Saul Yamini, owner of Pink Dot. If you would have asked me what was the hardest part of my business, it would be the drivers. And I would always say, if only I could have robots doing my deliveries. And I've overseen over 1 million deliveries in my lifetime. And this is the most, I mean, this is West Hollywood. You guys are the most cutting edge city, forefront. I mean, you know, cannabis lounges when other cities are banning smoking. I mean, I really highly, you know, think this is an amazing thing for our city, for our companies. This would really help my business. I don't know if you guys know this, but we're the highest grossing store on Postmates, and Postmates has helped our business, you know, go to another level. And, you know, adding these robots to do our deliveries would be, you know, amazing. And I really support them, and I think, you know, it's really the future. The guys at Postmates told me about this about a year ago, and I flew out to their facility in San Francisco, and I actually saw the first original robot that they made, and the way they constructed this whole thing, and the way they went, the way they went about it, and it's really amazing what these guys are doing. And they really, I mean, they're on top of it. They're not gonna make any mistakes. These guys are really the real deal, and I highly recommend that we be the first city to do this and do it right, and, you know, set the tone like we always do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Saul, quick question. How many deliveries do you have usually a day?
So with Postmates or with Pink Dot? Well, in general, we do about 300 deliveries a day.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you very much. Mr. Larry Block, and then we have some citizen position slips. If anyone else wishes to speak, if you're moved, please, while Mr. Block is speaking, fill out a slip and bring it to the city clerk.
Larry Block, West Hollywood. I'm a big fan of Postmates, and if you don't know what really Postmates does, it delivers restaurant foods to your house, and you buy a monthly membership for $9.99, you have no delivery charges. So I'm a monthly membership member, and I order from Postmates every single night, and I do not have any problem meeting the car or the driver through the app in front of my house on the sidewalk. Now, I usually order in because I'm visually impaired. It's hard to see at night through one eye with all the lights glaring, so I prefer to invite people over and order into the house. And so the notion that I would have to compete on a sidewalk during the day or night with a motorized vehicle, or that the notion that this is going to take traffic off the street when it's just going to slow every car going by down while they turn their heads looking at this. The notion that this is safe when you cross the street. And how's this little autonomous vehicle going to cross the street? The first accident. This is the densest city, one of the densest cities west of the Mississippi. So why are we testing this in this crowded pool? They should take their great idea and test it in the valley. And when they perfect their idea, they can come to our city with a perfect plan. Because this council is going to be responsible for the first accident and the first person who gets hurt doing this. We compete with dogs and scooters and bikes and cars just to walk through this city. So if they're not fully vetted yet with even an app for Apt Out, then it's not fully vetted. And I think that we can wait till they test it somewhere else.
Thank you, Mr. Block. The citizen position slips?
Yes, the following people did not wish to speak but wanted to express their opposition to the recommended item. Kathy Blavis, West Hollywood, and Stephanie Harker, West Hollywood.
Thank you so much. All right, colleagues.
I have one question.
Please.
It says that your pilot program would be 3 months. If there are issues, are we able to make it less than 3 months? I assume we can shut it down. We're not required to keep it all 3 months if it's
That
not.
could be an option. I think that's why we wanted to have these monthly check-ins with Transportation Commission, just to see how it's working, and we can evaluate it on a monthly basis. And if for some reason things are just not working out, we can pull the plug.
Okay.
And what happens after 3 months?
I think based on the results, we'll see where we go from there. It's up in the air. I think we could extend it for another period if we want to explore more options or refine this delivery system, but there's no commitment after the 3-month period right now.
But there's also not in the current staff report any flexibility to do what you suggested, right?
I'm sorry, say again?
There's, there's no commitment, clearly,
Right.
but there's also no flexibility in this current staff report to do what you suggested. So who's the "we" that would decide to extend the period from 3 months to 6? Or does that need to come back to this council and another?
Right, the idea is to come back after 3 months to report back, and we can decide how we want to proceed with the next step.
Okay, so do we know? Okay, thank you. Please.
Bob, what I heard was that the app is not ready yet. So is this a pilot to see if the technology works, or is this a pilot to see if it works in West Hollywood?
I'm told that it's been tested elsewhere, and it's been tested in a senior living facility. It's also been tested on a limited scale in San Francisco. So what they would like to do is test it in a urbanized area such as West Hollywood, and to, again, work out the kinks. It's a pilot program to see how it does in a busier environment like West Hollywood, and refine the technology through that pilot program.
Thank you.
John?
Yeah, I had a question. I understand it is out in the lobby. Is it possible for it to be brought into the council chambers so people could see what we're talking about?
While they're figuring that out, anyone?
I mean, do you have an answer? Can it be brought in, or is it?
So the technology is developed to be able to operate on sidewalks. We use a remote control to operate it within rooms. So in order to make sure that it's operating safely, I don't think we're going to bring it inside.
Oh, okay, because it's carpeted here and, okay.
Yeah, but I can answer Councilmember Meister's question if that's okay.
Please, go ahead.
So regarding the app work, that's just designing the app because the city staff requested that we have a customer opt-out. So we would need to code the app to have that before we'd be able to begin.
Maybe you need to explain what the customer opt-out is.
Yeah, so the customer opt-out would be in the settings menu. You could say, generally what would happen is in the way that it operates in the city of Los Angeles, in the areas that are bordering West Hollywood, is that if a customer is going to be getting a delivery through a robot, the app tells you, but we don't currently have a menu option for a customer to say, I don't want to do that. So when the city staff said, in order to do this pilot, we would like for you to have an opt-out so that if an individual does not want to have goods that are delivered by a robot, that they should be able to do so. So that just requires us to have that coded into the app before we'd be able to operate within West Hollywood.
So I have another question for you. So if someone orders something from Pink Dot and they're on Santa Monica Boulevard on a Friday night when we have a very huge crowd of people, who's gonna decide whether to send the robot or somebody else?
Yeah, so the way that we do that is we look at where the robot is located from the previous delivery that it had done, as well as the distance that the delivery is moving. It doesn't make sense for a robot to do a delivery at 3 miles an hour, leaving Pink Dot and ending up on the southwest side of town, because that would take a significant amount of time. The food could get cold. There's a potential for any number of impediments to happen through that process. But if the delivery is happening from Pink Dot to just a couple of blocks down, and we already have a robot that's in that area, we will direct that robot to go do that pickup. It's also possible that we have an individual that's already in that location, so it would make more sense for the individual to do that pickup in that case.
Okay.
Can I ask, while you're here, can I ask a question as well? Just thinking about many of our buildings that are multifamily buildings where there are stairs, there aren't elevators. If I order from my condo building, what happens with the robot? How does it actually get to my unit? Or do I have to come downstairs and meet it? And how does it overcome the fact that along the way there are probably stairs in places, or there may be a ramp in places? How does it know to deal with that?
So that's a great question. So the way that we've designed the robot is that it's able to climb certain amounts of curbs in order to be able to access certain places. But when the order comes in, based upon your location, we're deciding whether to send the robot or not. So if there are stairs that are the only way to access your home, the robot isn't going to be a good candidate for that delivery, unless it's something that you especially want, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. And then it's not able to operate within a building?
No, it's not.
Okay, so it would be able to come to like the front desk, but then the person receiving would have to come down and meet the robot, correct?
Yeah, it would really depend. I mean, I think granted in the future, we would love to develop a world in which, we're able to, if the robot comes in, that the doorman knows exactly where the robot is going and then would be able to lead it on its way. But I think that's sort of step 2 of this process. I think more than anything else, the way we view it is that our customers aren't necessarily the people that are buying the items, because they're only interacting with the robot for a minute or two. Our customers are the people that are walking alongside the robots on our sidewalks, because those are the people that are going to be interacting with it for the longest amount of time. So I think in this case, that's the real piece that we're working on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Duran.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank everybody who came out to speak tonight. I just wanted to comment that I generally support the Chamber of Commerce and support piloting new technologies. But I'm not going to support this item tonight, and I'll state my reasons why. I think that a pilot program like this is best suited for a closed campus like Pacific Design Center or Cedars-Sinai Hospital, or someplace where we can control the impacts rather than placing our streets in play to experiment with these devices. I think that historically we have tried to balance so many competing interests for our public space between pedestrians, cyclists, motorists, others who are making use of the sidewalk and other mass transit. And while I've slowly come to accept that scooters are part of all that, I don't think I can support this item tonight. I think that it's too much. It's too much chaos as there is, too much difficulty. And I think at the end of the day, I tend to be more of a pragmatist than an idealist. The idealist in me says yes for innovation, yes for new technologies, yes for experimentation, yes for pilot programs. But the pragmatist in me says not functional in such a dense part of Southern California, too much competition on the streets and sidewalks with too much human activity. The food's likely to be cold, subject to vandalism. What happens when the 3 robots get hit by cars or buses? Or by a scooter, and I can just imagine so many more difficulties that seem to outweigh placing our public streets and sidewalks at play. So I could support this item if it was much more limited in terms of the scope of the pilot program in a more contained campus environment, but I think this is just too wide and too much, and so I cannot support the item this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Councilmember Duran. Mayor Pro Tem Horvath.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to thank everybody who came out tonight to speak on this. I recently, through National League of Cities, was up in San Francisco with Tech for America, and Postmates was one of the presenters at that event. And their focus and their discussion was diversity and equity. And I think it's something that their company is committed to, and I think I saw in their presentation to communities around the country shared values that we have here in West Hollywood. I want to commend them on how exemplary they have been and how they've approached the city to bring this pilot project here. I think we have had the experience of tech companies trying to bring new technologies into our city without our participation, without our conversation, without engaging the community. Quite frankly, in the face of a lot of community opposition, they still show up. And I think Postmates has done the exact opposite. They came to the city asking if they could even be considered. Then they went through a process of many community meetings and commission meetings and coming and working with our staff to say what's possible. And I think that all of that process will not solve for every potential error that happens in a pilot program. But I think it's to be commended that they have invested as much time, energy, and resources as they have into working with us to see if this can work. I think the issues of access are legitimate concerns. I think both for people who can't leave their homes and might benefit from a delivery service, and for people who are looking to share a sidewalk, oh, here it comes, who are looking to share a sidewalk with one of these devices. I've seen them in operation on Melrose Avenue, which in Los Angeles, around a very densely populated pedestrian activity. If you've been on Melrose between Fairfax and La Brea, those sidewalks are packed. People enjoyed interacting with this robot. It knew how to stop. It didn't run into people, despite there being many, many people on the sidewalks. They interacted with it. They approached it. It stopped. There were no disastrous accidents. Nobody got run over. I'm not saying that that is 100% not possible. I just don't know. But I think, but I do know in witnessing how it has interacted with pedestrians on the sidewalk, if there's chaos on the sidewalk, it will participate in chaos because it's already there. I don't think this slow-moving robot is going to be the cause of chaos. There are going to be 3, according to what I read in this staff report, there will be 3 robots that will be somewhere in our city. While I would love for everybody to be able to see these robots, and I'm glad that it's now moving potentially into camera view, I think that even if this pilot operation happens for 3 months in the city, there will still be a substantial portion of the population that never sees this with only 3 robots operating in the city. I think the concerns that have been raised are legitimate, but I think they should be tempered on both sides. While this may be an opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to have traffic moving more smoothly, and a lot of those promises that the pilot program makes, I agree. With 3 robots, those are not going to be the overall outcome in 3 months. However, I also don't think that we're going to have mass chaos and problems with only 3 robots operating in the city. What we're trying to do, I think, in this pilot program is to try something new, to respond to the concerns of the community, that there's traffic congestion because of deliveries, that there's, all kinds of problems that we're trying to address that have been mentioned both in the staff report and in the comments that were made here tonight. I don't expect this to be a flawless pilot program. In fact, being in West Hollywood for all of the reasons that have been raised, I think there will be issues. That's what will either make the program better and usable, or it will shut it down. We heard tonight that it doesn't have to last 90 days if it's really as much of a problem as some people fear. And I think that I'm glad to know that we've reserved the right to be able to do that. But I also think that we're trying to do something new to see what might work. And with 3 robots in the city that are going to be full-time babysat by a human, it's hard for me to imagine how that's more problematic than some of the other technologies that we've welcomed into the city, or people are using in the city, whether we like them or not. So I'm interested in this pilot program. I'm interested in doing it in a way where we feel it's manageable. I think our staff and our commissions have done a great job in terms of providing recommendations that help to restrict and monitor how this pilot program would exist for 3 months in the city. And I'm open to hearing if there are other conditions. I think what we heard tonight is because these robots can't operate sufficiently indoors, I don't know that the limited campus idea actually works because it can't operate in the buildings. But I am open if there are other recommendations that we could consider. But I think what I'm interested in most is our ability to try this. It's hard to believe that this thing even exists and can do what it has been said. And I'm interested in seeing if it's possible. And if it's not, then it doesn't work for the city. But at least we tried something new.
Councilmember Meister.
Thank you. I think for me, the question is, can our city infrastructure handle it? And I had the same thoughts when we discussed scooters. What we need to do is we need to be creating a separate lane or a separate zone for this type of technology for e-bikes and scooters and robots. We can't be looking at these items and saying it's okay for us to put them on our pedestrian walkways, on our sidewalks. I just don't think that is fair to our citizens. It's not fair to the pedestrians that here we are, the most pedestrian-friendly city, and we're making it more difficult to be a pedestrian. So I think that until we answer the urban design question, it's really not the right time for us to be testing this technology. The other thing is, even you have 3 units, that's not what is going to happen. If those 3 units work out, that's great, but then you're looking at not 3, you're looking at 10 or 20 or 30, and then it's a whole different thing. The pilot really doesn't represent what it would end up being. And so to say that we would see all the problems with just 3 of these units, I just wonder how this unit's going to make it up La Cienega. I can barely make it up when I had a stick shift. So anyway, I'm not opposed to different forms of mobility, but again, for me, it comes back to our infrastructure and not having, what we need to have that lane between where our cars are and where our pedestrians are for the robot, for our scooters, for e-bikes and bicycles. So I can't be supportive of this item.
Councilmember Heilman.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to everyone who came out tonight, and I'm so glad you were able to bring it into the council chambers so that we could see it as well as the public here and the public at home. I don't have food delivered. I don't use Postmates. I buy food at the grocery store and cook it at home. It's a lot cheaper and it's a lot healthier usually, except I buy junk too. So for me, this is something that I would never really need, but there are people like Larry who order food all the time, and I have neighbors who order food every single night, and I don't get it, but that's what they do, and this would make it, I think, more convenient. Councilmember Meister raised the issue of this not being fair to our residents because it will be on the sidewalks. I would sort of turn that a little bit around and say it's also not fair to all of us that we have delivery vehicles, double parking, and driving on our streets and increasing traffic. And there are lots of delivery vehicles. If you go to any of our restaurants. Just go to Fresh Corn Grill every night. There's like 5 or 6 people coming in to pick up things that they're now delivering to another person, and all of those people are in cars. I think this actually offers a possible solution, not a total solution to that, but I think it is something that we should at least consider and allow this pilot project to be implemented. I think the benefits of it are reducing vehicle traffic, automobiles, reducing carbon emissions, and it also has the potential, I think, to serve a lot of people in the community. We talk about this as if it's just some whim of Postmates, but there are a lot of people in the community who like having their food delivered by a company like Postmates. And if this could make it more efficient and actually reduce the amount of vehicle traffic, I think we should welcome it. I also think that this is going to have a unique locational bias. I think it's going to make more sense for Pink Dot to deliver to existing businesses on Sunset, where they're not going to travel a far distance, as opposed to going 1.5 miles to deliver for Pink Dot. They're likely going to bundle those with a vehicle. This is probably going to be used for shorter trips just because of the desire to keep the food hot or cold. But I think we should give it a try for 3 months, see how it works, and then we'll learn more information about it. I am particularly concerned about the impact on people who are disabled, people who are going to be impacted potentially by coming into conflict with this, and not just people who are physically disabled. The flashing lights can be triggering for some people who have other types of disabilities. I think that needs to be thought about as well during this 3-month period. But thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you. I want to, it appears that there are votes to pass this, so I want to make a friendly amendment or have some discussion about what happens on the 91st day, because I think if this rolls out and we're not alerted that it has been shut down by the Transportation Commission, I'm concerned that on day 91 to get it back to the City Council could take another 90 or 120 days. And I guess what I want to say is that if it's working while the staff comes up with their final recommendation about what the next step would be, if my colleagues would allow the staff to make a decision about whether it continues until it gets to a council agenda after 90 days.
I would also include within that staff also has the authority to shut it down within the 90 days if there are some sort of problems.
Yes.
And I would support that as a friendly amendment.
Well, the Mayor Pro Tem.
I accept that, yeah.
Okay. So with that, if there's nothing else and no one wishes to speak, we will mark our votes. Motion to adopt by Mayor Pro Tem Horvath, seconded by me, and the item passes 3-2. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We shall now move on, and thank you again to the staff to taking this to all those commissions and all those boards and getting us all that information. Thank you. The advisory board appointment. I would just ask that maybe you could take your conversation outside, because we just need to get it.
You're fine.
Get
You're
it,
fine.
Yola.
You're fine.
All right, dear. Okay, we have an at-large nomination for the Disability Advisory Board. Are there any nominations among the people here or others?
I would like to nominate Patrick Ryan Blood.
Mr. Patrick Ryan Blood has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Hearing none, Mr. Blood is now appointed to the City of West Hollywood Disability Advisory Board. All right. meeting schedule for the summer of 2020. I received an email, maybe all of us did, that July 13th is the first day of a convention, a political convention that many of us, hopefully all of us, will be interested in watching because it's our government on July 13th. I don't know if my colleagues and I have an opinion about that.
What's wrong with the 6th?
Yeah, and.
Why can't we just stick to the 6th?
And the 20th.
I think it's hard for staff to get the agenda ready with the 4th of July holiday.
Yeah, we were trying to see if we could cancel that meeting due to the proximity of the 4th of July weekend. And then July 20th, I believe, we will not have one council member, so we were going to ask that it be rescheduled. And instead of just canceling it, we were moving it to the 13th.
Do we need a meeting in July?
I believe so.
Why don't we just have one on the 20th? I mean, I don't even know who can't make it, but we've operated on 4 wheels before. Don't have to have 5. And if somebody needs something held for the next meeting because it's of particular importance, they can ask.
One of the things we could do is why don't we keep the meeting penciled in for the 20th, and we'll have the meeting only if we have to. We'll work on our agenda to just go dark for the month of July. We'll try to do that. The only challenge I know is we do have a couple of potential initiatives that have to qualify and be ready for the ballot. So the timing of that is the only concern we would have. But we'll follow up with staff on that.
Okay. And the 4th of July is on a Saturday, so the holiday is Friday, but usually agendas come out on Wednesday.
But
So-
I think a lot of people are probably going to take Friday off, or maybe a 4-day weekend, take Monday off as well.
I'm agnostic about whether it moves.
I'm fine with keeping July 6th, but
I'm fine anyway. I don't really want us to not have a meeting at all in July because we know what happens in the follow-up after that.
Okay, so then we'll keep them both on the agenda, but if staff finds that we don't have to have the 20th, we'll circle back.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Excluded consent item 2I. Thank you, Mr. Noonan.
Good evening. I could provide you with a summary report of the item or take questions.
Councilmember Meister is just going to riddle you with some questions, and then if it gets super complicated, you can give a super complicated answer.
okay, so I guess, first of all, I want to know what the recontact process is now. The recontact process. So when you have the list and you're going through the list, what is the process? How many times do you call people?
Right.
And
Thank you for the question. That is a great question. So we typically try 3 points of contact. We will try, we've sent 2 letters, and now we're doing phone calls.
so why do we keep them on the list if we haven't contacted them after 3 contacts? Or do we keep them on the list?
We don't. We don't. Every 3 years. So this is, the item is, and the question is about our wait list for the rental program and the affordable housing program for the city. And every 3 years, we audit and check in to make sure that people on the list are still active and interested in housing. And as you know, when we do open the list, we do invite anyone and everyone from everywhere to participate in the list and put their name on. Well, people that are farther away are going to be less interested 6 years later in receiving housing in West Hollywood. And so we do make every effort to reach out to folks. Oftentimes, what we get back when we send out the letters the first time, if we get a response back to say undeliverable, we will typically send another letter just to make sure that it wasn't a glitch in the system with the mail, or that we had it wasn't something to do with just a keying error to get it out to the household. The second one, when that comes back, it's now becoming a little more obvious that it's definitely not a current address. we then went ahead with phone calls as well, just to make sure, because housing is so important to folks. So that's about concluded, and I think that the staff report provided the numbers for the lists. Doing this every 3 years is important also for our property owners, because certainly they need to lease the units up quickly, and so we do need to make sure that people that are on the list are active, engaged, they're interested in housing, and they want the units in West Hollywood, which quite honestly are very fabulous units.
So just based on the report then, so over 1,100 people now are off the list, right? That's on page 2.
Yeah, as of now, and it's, I think it's, I should mention that the moderate income list, we've never audited before, and so I wasn't surprised when the numbers came back very high for that list.
So when we get people applying, what information do we get besides income?
So this time around, so we did open the list in November, and we had around 4,000 people sign up. And we do ask them for the number of people in their household income. We did also ask them for a number of voluntary questions, their age, if they fit into different protected classes, and so that we could understand how best we could queue them into housing.
Okay, so we know their income, and we know their income, and we know their household composition.
Yeah, and when people sign up for the wait list, we're basing it on their disclosed information. And so that's different. When we actually go to lease up the unit, we will confirm that with bank stubs, paychecks.
So, all right, so what I would suggest, and you're also suggesting that we combine the low income and the moderate income into one list, is that right?
Yeah,
I think that's a great idea.
Two reasons for it. Really, it's better efficiency for us. It'll be a better management system. It also allows a household that's been on the list whose income changes to remain active and current on the list. They would just move, for instance, if it's a low-income household that starts to earn more, we would be able to offer them moderate income housing opportunities, rather than right now, we would just have to say, I'm sorry, you don't qualify for the lower income list.
You have to get on the other list, right?
Right.
So what I would suggest is adding to those questions, the required questions, where they're living now, what their living situation is it are they in a 1-bedroom, or are they in a 2-bedroom, and what they're paying in rent. Because they might be in a unit that's, a 2-bedroom unit, $2,000 a month or $1,800 a month, and they're looking for $1,500 a month, but they don't have such a bad deal, whereas someone else may be looking at $2,500 a month. So their situation, depending of course on income and the number of people in their household, might be a more dire situation, and maybe they should be more of a priority as we look at the list and putting people into new housing, inclusionary housing. So what I would like to ask my colleagues is that we get a little more information when we collect information as people go on our list. So we know that we're getting their income, we know that we're getting their household composition. I would suggest that we find out, what kind of living situation they have now, how many bedrooms, and what they're paying in rent.
You bet, and if I could just add a little bit of context. So the City Council had provided us with direction on certain priorities to rent the units up using, and two of those priorities are, one of is currently overhoused, another one is rent burdened. We are planning an item to come back in the end of spring or early summer to clarify what the ranking of those priorities are, because right now we do use them, but we don't have any ranking except for the one priority that the council has given us, is that displaced households should come first. But then down the list, it's really a question of, well, is the priority for live work first, and then overhoused, then rent burdened, or so we were going to come forward with some options for the council to consider.
So that's why it would be good to have this information in
Yeah,
advance.
and we do ask for that information at the time of lease up for the units, and so we could certainly go ahead and ask for it at the beginning or earlier on in the waitlist process.
Well, I think it would also help us to figure out what our needs are as a city in terms of housing. So I think the more information we can have up front, and know, well, yes, we might have 2,000 people on our list, but, maybe half of them are in a situation that's not that much better, not that much worse than what we're offering. And so, that would give us just more, I think just more information would be helpful.
Councilmember Heilman.
I thank you for bringing this forward, and thank you for your work in trying to clean up the list that we have. I'm concerned about my colleague's suggestion because the more information we begin collecting, the more burdensome it is to apply, the more of a problem it is to manage. And I think we also run the risk that some of the choices that and some of the information we may be gathering, it may look like we are discriminating in some ways based on household size and based on current living situation, and I don't want us to run that kind of risk. I think there has to be a balance between getting the basic information we need, which is income and their financial status, and there might be more information about their financial status we should gather, but getting too much information becomes burdensome for staff as well as burdensome for the applicant. So I hope as you look at this, you'll consider that as well.
And I guess just before, because maybe this is an opportunity to get on the record this, but I actually was on the naive opinion or conclusion that these people were selected by lottery for these apartments. So it sounds like people are selected and then they're shuffled into a list of priorities. And understandably, we want to rehouse West Hollywood residents first, and probably the number of times you've gotten through all West Hollywood residents that need to be rehoused is, limited. But the ones or twos that we fill, 13 in the last year, right? I mean, so is there some kind of subjective review that really begins to say, well, you're paying $675 and this is $645 and we're not going to move you, and you're paying $875 but you're paying $945 and you live on Curson and just outside of West Hollywood? I mean, does that go on?
These are all really good questions, and that doesn't go on. That's a little too much in the weeds, and I would be a little too fearful of what Councilmember Hellman's
relieved
raised,
to hear you say
because I think it's very important that we also follow fair housing laws and rules, and that we also try to reduce or combat prior institutional and structural racism that was brought forward through redlining and other reasons, eliminating or limiting the amount of access for minorities. And so I think that it's very important for us to have that balance. I think even more so now that we're having this conversation, I'm very happy that we as staff are going to come back to the council and ask you for how we apply these priorities, because this was a report, I think, back from 2005 or 2006, and it does lay them out, but as I said, it doesn't really give us very good direction on how we should apply them. We do a lottery when we bring new people, when we collect new people, and so this interest list that we created in November, we will run a lottery. It'll be a random number generator, and that's used to just set your place in the list. So that gives you your number or your placement. The next step is to, when we have an availability in the program, we send a notice out to 25 to 50 people, depending on if we have 1 or 2 units, 3 units. And then that's your opportunity to apply for the unit. And if you apply for the unit, that's where the priorities come into play, is that we would queue someone. If there's 4 or 5 people that have applied to a unit, we would then queue that list of people that are interested in the unit that the owner is willing to rent to. We would queue that in a way to say, offer the unit to this person first, this person second, this person third.
And Peter, just to clarify, that the process for choosing people not for inclusionary units, but for permanent like housing corporation units, that may be determined based on a different list that is maintained by the housing corporation, and they may have to choose their potential residents solely by a lottery.
That is very correct. And the West Hollywood Housing Corporation has independent lists for each of their buildings. So there's many lists in the city, actually. And this is something that we provide as our housing counselors provide this to folks that come in looking for housing quite often, is the number of lists that are available and open. Like, for instance, right now, the LGBT Center senior building at McAdam Place has their list is open, and they're collecting applicants for that building. And so we've been letting people know about that.
Several years ago, I had proposed, this is, I think, even before your time, that we just have one master list, but unfortunately, the different funding sources don't allow that to take place. So many of the projects that the Housing Corporation builds have to have, by law, a particular type of list, and we can't combine them all together.
Sounds like we've asked all our questions, and we're ready to take a vote. And the item passes 5-0. Thank you, Peter, for staying so late and answering those questions. I think that was
not a problem. I'm just going to
informative
sit
to all
right
of
here
us.
for the next item.
All right. Then I take back my thanks for staying late. Remove that thank you from the record. Item 6A is an ordinance of the City of West Hollywood amending Title 17 of the West Hollywood Municipal Code, implementing an alternative schedule for required painting for properties designated as cultural resources, clarifying income calculation for determining the relocation fee for a no-cause eviction.
So again, I could provide a summary report. I do have my colleagues from planning and legal services with me if we have specific questions. This item it is really two parts, as you read out. One, it's creating an alternative for paint standards for historic buildings and how to evaluate the need for the routine maintenance that's within the rent stabilization ordinance. The second item is clarifying how we calculate our relocation fees, and then also clarifying that or removing some language that the council asked us to remove back in 2017.
All right, we have two speakers. Did we have questions for Peter before speakers? Looks like
No,
we
I can wait
don't.
until after the speakers.
Okay. Danielle Leidner-Peretti. Danielle?
Good evening, Danielle Leidner, right?
You can pull the mic down.
Right down.
Okay.
There you go.
So I submitted a letter on this matter. AGLA, I represent AGLA, and the association is very concerned about the removal of the language regarding relocation fees. The reason being that this language has been there for 30 years, it would signal to the court that, excuse me, that owners are no longer have the right to recover the relocation fee when a renter fails to vacate without the addition of either specific language regarding the court's authority to award the repayment. The owner might lose this legal remedy. In addition, I'd like to point out that both Santa Monica and the City of Los Angeles permit owners to place relocation in escrow, which affords a level of protection while at the same time providing renters for an incentive to vacate the unit. If this language is removed, because there is no escrow option in the City of West Hollywood, it would really make it seem as though the city is saying that owners do not have this option any longer. So I urge you to either keep the language in or alternatively provide specific language granting the court the authority to award repayment of relocation when the renter does not vacate in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perret. Beverly Kenworthy, be followed by Mr. James Litz.
Good evening, Beverly Kenworthy with the California Apartment Association. I'd just like to echo Danielle's comments. We think it's important that the language remains, or something similar to it remains, so that both owners and tenants have clearly prescribed requirements and responsibilities in complying with the law. We just are concerned that, you know, somebody could be out of money, and an owner could be out of money when they're doing the right thing and they're following this prescribed requirements by the city of West Hollywood. I just don't understand why we would remove that language if our intention, as it says in the staff report, that it's not the city's intention for the tenant not to pay it back. So it does, I have spoken to our in-house counsel, and they're very concerned about it, and thinks that it's problematic. Thank you.
Beverly?
Ms. Kenworthy, I think Councilmember, excuse me, Meister has a question for you.
Yeah, I've done some research, and the language that is currently in our RSO is not in the city of LA, it's not in the city of San Francisco, it's not in the city of Santa Monica. And one of the reasons is because this is something that is between the tenant and the landlord, and not the city. So what is LA and Santa Monica and San Francisco, what are they doing differently?
I can't speak to San Francisco, but as Danielle pointed out, the city of LA and Santa Monica allow the money to be put in an escrow account.
And is that part of their rent stabilization ordinance?
Yes. So that is the difference. So it offers that level of protection, because under this, you know, they could take the money, not leave, and the owner could possibly have to go to court to get it back, incurring more costs.
Would you like to say?
A lawyer.
Just answer.
Sorry. I just wanted to also clarify
Please
that.
speak into the microphone just so that everyone can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
So what I was trying to say in my comment is that in Santa Monica and Los Angeles, there is the escrow. So the issue of non-payment doesn't come to light in the same way as it does in West Hollywood, because in West Hollywood, the notice and payment occur together. So theoretically, the renter receives the relocation prior to vacating the unit. By taking out this language without putting in clarity, directing the court to have authority over the matter, what it does is it basically makes the court think, okay, this language is in the ordinance for 30 years, you've now removed it, you don't want that option to exist. So,
but you can understand why we want to remove it, though.
To be honest, I don't, because I don't think that the city is dictating anything. It's simply saying that you, renter, who received a relocation allowance as prescribed by the ordinance, are, what's the word I'm looking for, are required to return that relocation, meaning you forfeit it, if you do not vacate the unit as specified in the notice.
But the problem is, though, that it makes it look like we're the ones that are going to be dealing with that when it's not. It's the court, it's the landlord.
Then at least, if you're going to remove something that you've had in your ordinance for 30 years, then, and your intention is not to take away the owner's ability to obtain a civil remedy, then at minimum, include language to that effect in the ordinance. Simply taking away that language without any clarifying language stating that the court has the authority to do what you're suggesting is permissible would kind of leave the issue silent. And because it's an active thing, you had it there and you're taking it away, it would be easy for a court to interpret it in a way that you don't intend. So that's why in the letter, in our, public comment today, we're saying that if you're going to remove this language, which we would prefer stay in, then balance it by putting in language that gives the court authority, which is what you are indicating is the council's objective. So,
What if we were silent on the whole matter? In other words, took out the whole thing rather than leaving that one line?
you mean take out the waiver language entirely?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer. I don't want to give misinformation. In the way that I reviewed it, the language that we are concerned with is the possibility that you have a situation where, pursuant to the ordinance, the owner is complying with the RSO, providing the relocation, and then the person doesn't vacate the unit in the time prescribed, and they're now not able to receive a refund. So I don't know if removing the waiver language addresses that. Like I said, I think there should be clarifying language of some sort.
So, in the interest, not of time, because it's early, but in the interest of running this meeting, maybe we can hear from the last member of the public, and then we'll hear from our city attorney, and then if he has questions, or if we have questions for you, we'll bring you back up. But I think James is next, and he deserves an opportunity to make his comment.
James Litz, West Hollywood, going to take only 30 seconds here. I support keeping it in an escrow. Escrows are used for third-party transactions a lot, so that not just for buying a house or something, but an impartial third party with an escrow would make a lot of sense on this, and you keep it out of the courts. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, do you have any point of view on this? It obviously went through your office and came to us.
No. Well, it was really initiated by Councilmember Meister. I do not recommend taking out the waiver language in the section. I don't know if Peter or the other staff have comments on this, but some other ideas have come up. But we could certainly talk about those. But I certainly don't recommend taking out the waiver language.
The new waiver language or the old language?
The old language.
What did I say I was going to do? Oh, then Councilmember Heilman, thank you.
Thank you. I think that this is well-intentioned, but it has unintended consequences that aren't being thought through. And I think the unintended consequence for tenants who are being relocated, and we wish we could get rid of the state law and other laws that allow for these tenant displacements, but we require the tenant to be given the relocation benefits at the time of the notice. And if the tenant doesn't move out, what's going to happen? The landlord is going to sue that tenant, and then that tenant is going to have to face a lawsuit, and they're going to face a UD, an unlawful detainer, which is going to make it much harder for that tenant to get an apartment in the future. So I think the reason for keeping this is more compelling to me. I think everyone is saying that if you don't move out, you shouldn't get the benefit of the relocation benefits. I also think that this is actually helpful for our staff when they're faced with one of these relocation situations. We've had a number of tenants who've had various challenges, let's say, and knowing that they will lose the relocation benefits if they don't leave is actually a tool that can be used to help them relocate, help them find a different place. I think we would all like to get rid of some of the relocation situations altogether, but I think this is a well-intentioned mistake that is going to have collateral consequences on tenants that are far more damaging in the long run. So I would urge us not to move forward with that. But while I have the floor, the other aspect of this ordinance, I'm completely fine with the changing of the painting. That I think makes sense. I would recommend that we either not go forward with this or get additional information on it rather than vote on that aspect of it tonight.
The second aspect regarding the tenant
Yes.
relocation fee. Okay.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath.
I'm fine to hold on that part of it. I do know that the alternative painting schedule was part of direction from a subcommittee that convened on many occasions for quite some time and has been waiting to see some of these recommendations actually seen through to benefit owners of historic properties. So I think that piece of it I would like to see move forward tonight, even if we're having questions about the second aspect of it.
Councilmember Meister.
Thank you. So on the first, on the incentive from the Historic Preservation Commission, and I have some questions also, Peter. You're suggesting that that for historic properties that we don't need to stick to the every 4 years and every 7 years for the common areas and the exterior, is that right?
Correct. It wouldn't be immediately 4 and 7, but that it would be a review by the planning department and their recommendation on paint that would be considered by the hearing examiner.
So one of my concerns, and I think I brought this up when this was first brought to us in January, is that there were other parts of this incentive package that was discussed by HPC and by the planning department. And one of them had to do with code compliance. And code compliance having more involvement with Mills Act and historic properties. So my concern is that by not having a minimum or maximum time when it should be reviewed, maybe we need to have some other mechanism. So for example, maybe we don't require the painting, every 4 years for common interior areas and 7 for exterior, but maybe we require the property owner to file a condition report, something that code compliance can check and make sure that that something is being checked off. And because my concern is that it's going to slip through the cracks.
If I could, I'd like to give the mic to Doug Vu with planning to talk about how the process would work.
Good evening, council members. Doug Vu of Planning Department staff. So the way that the amendment is proposed right now, the city's historic preservation ordinance already requires that all historic buildings be maintained in good repair, and so for properties that are under a Mills Act contract, so of the 39 properties under the existing program, I believe the city has Mills Act contracts with 18 of those properties. As part of our periodic property inspection to make sure that properties are in compliance with their Mills Act contract, city staff would make sure that the building is properly maintained and cared for, and that includes the exterior painting as well as the interior painting of common areas. Now, for properties that are not under Mills Act contract, and I think that's what you're referring to, Councilmember Meister, the way that it's proposed right now, we would just rely upon the property owner to ensure that that the building is in good repair and well cared for, and it doesn't provide any sort of schedule to ensure that that the building has been maintained. So I understand the point that you're making, and so perhaps the department can take a look at ways in which we can proactively work to make sure that these other properties that are not under Mills Act contracts will be inspected periodically or whatever to ensure that they are being well maintained.
Well, and I do think that we need to include the Mills Act properties as well, because we've seen where, I mean, I just recently were dealing with a tenant who, where the property owner replacing windows that aren't matching, the historic windows that were there. So staff isn't always involved in that, and so and sometimes the checks are not every 4 years, even for the Mills contract, because it's a 10-year contract, so sometimes it's not for 6 years or 7 years. So what I'm suggesting is that for all historic buildings, including Mills contract, that at that 4-year period for the common, the interior common area and the exterior, and the 7 years for the exterior, so that the property owner doesn't have to do the painting, that they fill out a condition report, and that sets off an automatic mechanism so that code compliance goes and double checks that. And that way, it's not, the onus is not on a complaint, a tenant complaint-based basis. It's on us and on the property owner.
Yeah, well, I will say that for properties that are under Mills Act contracts, the city is trying to do a better job of making sure that we adhere to a more regular inspection schedule, which is supposed to occur. I mean, state law requires that we conduct these inspections at least, once every 5 years. And so that's something that, that the city is working hard to make sure that we maintain that schedule. And so I think that for properties under Mills Act contracts, I think that could be in alignment with some of the concerns that you have. What I think we need to work on are properties that do not have, a current Mills Act contract to ensure that, that they are being properly maintained, like you said, without having to rely upon, a tenant or someone filing a complaint or making a, rent adjustment claim.
Right, so, I mean, for me to be and I am supportive of this, I want incentives for our historic properties, I want people to keep our historic properties, but I would like to see, staff come back as soon as possible with a way to address this.
We could certainly do that.
Councilmember Duran.
Thank you, Mayor. On this particular item, I just want to note that the Rent Stabilization Commission seems to have been split 4-3 on the issue of taking out the language around the waiver for some of the same reasons expressed by my colleague, Councilmember Heilman, and our city attorney. Looking at this as somebody who's been in the landlord-tenant courts on occasion representing tenants, the judges who sit and listen to these hearings, they don't write the law. They just look to interpret what our ordinance says and then also to apply state law simultaneously. So I think having the language in there actually provides greater clarity for a court rather than leaving it out, which provides some ambiguity for the court. And while I still think the relocation fee would have to be returned, it does provide the extra added incentive of getting somebody to timely find new housing and avoid an unlawful detainer on their record. So I think that we should not remove the waiver language that's currently in our ordinance. I don't know if there's a majority to do that tonight, and if not, it needs more study, then I would support the more study as well. Thank you.
Councilmember Meister, and then someone should make a motion.
Thank you. So two things. One, regarding the relocation fees, is there a reason that we're not going with the CPI?
Well, yes, there is a reason we're not going with the CPI. What we're using is so the CPI is made out of a number of baskets of items, and rather than using the CPI in total, we are just focusing specifically on the rent component within the CPI, and so we increase the relocation fees based on the rent of primary residence component.
Wouldn't it be better?
And that's specifically on page 6 of the ordinance, on section C, which it says that the relocation fee shall be adjusted by inflation by the percentage change in the rent of primary residence component of the CPI-U index for Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim.
Because Los Angeles does it a little differently, right? They do it based on CPI, and they have a minimum and a maximum, and...
Well, this is their minimum and their maximum for their CPI is for their annual rent cap, where it's a 3% floor and an 8% ceiling. I'm not certain that they apply the floor and the cap to their relocation fee. I do believe that they do adjust it with CPI. I know that City of Santa Monica uses the rent of primary residence just like we use for our relocation fees.
Okay, and then last, I promise, on the third, what we've been discussing on the language, I would ask my colleagues that we just put it off for now and maybe go back to rent stabilization commission and see if there is better wording, some wording that everyone would be more comfortable with, that doesn't look like the onus is on the city, because we are not responsible for it. So I'm just suggesting that maybe there's just better language that we can be using if we're going to keep language in there on that.
So, Councilmember Harmon, before you make your motion, can I just ask a couple of quick questions?
Sure, of
Thank
course.
You. So the maintenance standards, I guess I just want to make sure I completely understand. So we're getting rid of deadlines and we're leaving it open-ended. We're not even putting like a 10-year, 15-year. We're just gonna go for it.
So as it's written now, that's the way it is, but from what Councilmember Meister said, perhaps the council would like to make some adjustments or amendments to what's being proposed so that the property owner would be required to periodically provide, a report, once every 5 or 10 years. So that's something that, could be
But
considered.
I'm actually not talking about a report, because what it says now is every 4 years and 7 years for interior courtyards and building exteriors, but we're not even considering like every 8 years and 15 years, like something that says, okay, you got to paint your building. I mean, it's been dirty white for, 12 years, and yes, it's, the windowsills are not flaking, but you got to paint that.
Yeah, we don't establish a specific requirement because it is specific to each building. It ranges for each building. I mean, it's not necessary for a building to be painted unless, there's evidence that the paint is deteriorating. And so for some buildings, that may be 10 years. For other buildings, that may be 15 years, depending upon, its exposure, its location, or other, characteristics of the building. And so for that reason, we intentionally did not want to prescribe a specific certain number of years due to the fact that, each building is unique and different.
Can I clarify that? It seems like, though, that there could be an order transmitted from staff directing somebody to paint a building. So even though there's no fixed time period here, it seems like the cultural heritage preservation staff would be authorized to direct a building owner that you must paint your building, and if they don't, then we can grant rent decreases based on their failure to do so.
That's correct.
Okay.
And getting it there is through a process of tenant complaint or city code compliance noticing it.
That's correct.
And it would be reviewed by the cultural heritage people to determine whether it's necessary.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct. So under the proposed amendment, if a rent reduction application is filed, RSO staff would relay that application to Planning and Development Services staff so that we can investigate the situation to determine whether or not the building should be painted.
And finally, I just want to say that I might be on the other end of this discussion about the language, but I think we should leave this language in. If a tenant doesn't vacate the unit, as complicated and maddening as it might be for them, there needs to be some consequences, and I think they should know that, and we should tell them, and it should be in our ordinances because they look to us for guidance as a city, as a protector of renters. So I know it's a hard stop. But I think we also provide weeks, sometimes months of assistance in getting people new housing, right?
We do, and in fact, we also charge property owners a fee that we use for a contract with Alliance for Housing and Healing. And this nonprofit works with tenants. Oftentimes when you're losing your housing, it's a grief process. And the first step is disbelief and then anger. And there's a number of steps before a tenant is really willing to finally leave the place that they called home for 20 or 30 years. And so it is very challenging sometimes for Alliance for Housing and Healing to essentially do the right thing, which is to help someone find that new home. And I know that our nonprofit provider and staff does use this as a gentle coaxing to help people realize that they do need to find other housing when they really don't want to. We don't want them to either, but the state law is very clear on a property owner's rights to remove a unit from the rental market.
Okay, Councilmember Harmon, thank you for your patience while I ask my questions.
No, thank you. I would move that we introduce on first reading the ordinance with the one change that section 3B on waiver, that language remain the same as it is in our current ordinance. And I think that language is that, however, if a tenant does not vacate his or her rental unit by the deadline specified in a valid no-fault termination notice, and if the landlord has not granted an extension, the tenant forfeits the relocation fee and must repay the fee to the landlord. That's our current language.
I think you wanted to make one more adjustment.
One very slight correction in section D, just below on the next page, there is a typo where housing is added before dwelling unit in 2 places in that paragraph. And so we would recommend striking from those 2 sentences the word housing in that last paragraph.
All right.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded by Councilmember Heilman and Councilmember Duran, and we officially spent 10 times the amount of time we spent talking about the $100 million budget, talking about painting 19 buildings. But we're doing the right thing. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Doug. I believe that brings us to one public comment. Terrific. Sir, George. George, if I'd known you there, I would have had Postmates deliver you a bottle of water.
Great idea. Hi. George Wiarski, live in WeHo. I've talked twice about the elimination of heavy and continuous dust as part of the process of excavation. I'd like to go back to it for for 2 reasons. One is that I think it is that the dust is a health, safety, and welfare issue, no matter even if it's for 1 day and 1 block, okay? But I'd like to I was talking about one example. It might seem that there's only been one example. I live in a 6-block area where there have been 14 approvals for construction, and some of it has taken place. It is not the only time that dust has been thrown out by excavation at the level that was across the street. The second reason is that I was informed after the last comment that the matter has been settled. That there is a construction mitigation plan which is signed by the developer, and state law and ordinance provide for all the mitigation you need. Okay. Then I want to make calls. City staff, very helpful, pointed me to ordinance 19-1088, very recently passed, missed it. There's nothing in ordinance 1088 which deals on any level, any place with dust. Under federal and state, could I just continue for a little bit?
Please finish your sentence, sir.
Under federal and state law, and now the ordinance, the only thing that is covered during the excavation process is that there be no debris, you know, and garbage and so on that will impede the storm drain system. That's nowhere near, right? And there could be other arguments. I mean, I know that there are notices that are put on, you know, the green walls, and that there is a code compliance officer, but nobody's going to call if they don't see anything talking about dust, right? They know about noise, they can call about that, but nothing. The only thing that would go to it is amending this recently passed, which is very difficult, recently passed ordinance to provide for something like Method B and to give the public notice that that should be followed.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Thank you for the time.
Absolutely. Council member comments? Hearing none, we are adjourned to our next meeting of Monday, March 16th at 6:30 p.m. West Hollywood Public Park Meeting Room. See you here. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, I think I have that in my calendar already. If not, I'm putting it in right now.